Good morning. Welcome to the Talking Cafe from the Taunton and Wellington team. My name is Carolyn. I'm a village agent with the team, and I'm delighted to welcome John French from the Southwest Heritage Trust, who's going to talk to you about the service and the lovely benefits both to learning and health and well-being. Welcome, John.
Hello.
So if you'd like to introduce your role and the service, an overview of the service, John, that would be lovely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. My name is John French. I work with the Southwest Heritage Trust, and we're the organisation in the Southwest who takes care of your heritage, your history, here in Somerset. We've got the County Museum, the Museum of Somerset, which is in Taunton Castle. We've got the Somerset Rural Life Museum in Glastonbury, just sort of near the base of the tour, and that's the museum that tells the rural history of the county. Somerset's famous for its industry, its agriculture, and that tells a fantastic history of how the changing landscape has morphed and developed over the years. We also have the Book and Tile Museum in Bridgewater, a smaller museum, but that is a museum that is the last remaining brick kiln in Bridgewater. Lovely little museum, and talks about the industrial heritage of the town of Bridgewater. It was famous for years as being an industrial centre, Bridgewater, manufacturing centre. And it was also known as a little bit of up north down here because there was so much going on. So a lovely little museum in Bridgewater. So we've got 3 museums. We also take care of all the archives for the county. So museums, we've got all the objects, the real things you can go and see behind glass. But in the archives, you can do your research into things like family history, house history, find out about your area, your location, look at old maps, documents. Very popular at the moment. There's loads of telly programs out there about searching for your ancestor, finding your ancestor, and tracing your roots. And we're the people that keep the real documents for the county of Somerset and Devon. And we also have Devon Record Office within the Southwest Heritage Trust. So people all around the world use us for finding information, documentary information, photographs, for doing research, family history, all sorts of things. And it's a free service if you come to us. And we're in Taunton and in Exeter for the archives. So we've got museum, we've got archives, but we're also the archaeologists of the county. So we're the people that take care of the historic sites and monuments that we manage. We also look after lots of planning issues. We're the people that make sure if somebody's digging a hole in the ground that they shouldn't be doing something they shouldn't be on a bit of land that is protected, or if they discover something, we're there to help and do advice and archaeology and arrange for that to happen so that the historic landscape is protected as well. We also have smaller elements within the trust, but one of those would be the Portable Antiquities Scheme, which is a fantastic scheme. It's been going for about 20 odd years now. And they're the people who you would go to if you find something buried in the ground or you come across something, say, in a ploughed field. Their role is to identify and give you advice about that object. We're not in the business of doing valuations. That's not our business, but we can certainly give you advice and information about it in return for where you found it. So we build up, and we have built up, millions of items, locations, so we know where archaeology and all sorts of things have been found. And indeed, if you find certain things, mainly sort of silver and gold, it is the law that you have to actually declare those. So you go to your local Portable Antiquities Scheme, declare those, and in certain cases they would go to a coroner and they'd inquest into the rightful owner, and they've got to sort out with the landowner and the finer and everything. So an important role that they play. So the Southwest Heritage Trust covers most of Somerset, a bit of Devon with the archives, and there's lots of things going on with loads of people. You know, if you visit some of the museums, you'll have a chance to see great, fantastic items, sometimes going back millions of years. You know, we're not just talking about recent history things, we're talking about things that have lived on this planet right at the early stages of when the Earth was forming. And you've got an opportunity to develop all sorts of skills with this as well. You can volunteer with some of our organisations as well. There's lots of people coming in to help run the service, run our services. We wouldn't be able to keep going without all the volunteers, fantastic volunteers that do sort of cataloguing, work at museums as front of house, stewards. There's lots of opportunities. And I know you'll pop up at some point our website, which is a really good place to actually have a look at all the things we do. There's a lot of health benefits to engaging with heritage as well. And we're just beginning to sort of capitalize on these after many, many years of being an information provider. We're now realizing that people have come to us and still come to us for all sorts of reasons. And some of those are for well-being reasons. People visit museums and they visit archives because in a way they're quite safe spaces. People feel comfortable in our buildings. I think that's because people know that we're quite impartial. We've got no political views. We've got no other agendas, and we just try and show the real facts. And like libraries, you know, people have often found libraries places that feel safe. The staff are really good and are used to all sorts of people, because we have everyone, absolutely everyone from all over the world coming into our museums, all ages. And, you know, traditionally in the past, people, I think, have found that really quite nice, a space where you can just think, you can learn, and perhaps more importantly, you can see the past. And we all know how quickly the world's turning. We're going through a pandemic at the moment. You know, in 1,000 years' time, people will be visiting museums looking at the COVID pandemic, or the first COVID pandemic, maybe, who knows. And it's really good to realise and see how the world in the country and your county has changed as well. The other thing also, which I find really, really useful seeing collections we have, is I feel a pride in our county of Somerset. All the wonderful things that we've done and achieved, and you can see those in museums and archives, and you can learn from the fantastic things that other people in history have achieved. But also, it's also a time of change, isn't it, for all sorts of things like race, gender, equalities. And we can learn what it was like in the past and how it has changed and how it is changing. And that's also really important. And there's all the questions at the moment about sort of statues and paintings, and, you know, we're involved with that, and we're very keen to offer you the facts. And also listen to people's views on what we should, what we shouldn't put on display, and all sorts of things. So there's lots going on. So that's the Southwest Heritage Trust, taking care of your fantastic history here in Somerset.
Absolutely, that sounds great. I do apologise, John. I have to keep muting, so I'm apologising. I'm not able to talk as much as, you know, in response. We're having a little, the sound isn't great. I'm on a different laptop at the moment, so I do apologise. I have to keep muting myself, so that's why I'm nodding and saying not a lot. But it's great to see what you're saying. It's brilliant. And I know we talked about this, and I'm sure you will reveal it if you can. We're all desperate to know when these places are opening up again. Do you have any more information on that yet?
Well, it's a fantastic question, because it's on everyone's mind, particularly ours as staff. And as you can see, I'm here working at home, and I've been working at home mostly for the last year, like many of our staff. Our sites have had to close by law because of the pandemic. And it's been a difficult year. It's been a really difficult year for all of us as employees looking after your heritage. We've had to try and move as much as we can online. So our website's been improved. We do loads on social media as well. So as well as maybe finding out information about the trust on our website, have a look at the individual Facebook pages. They're pretty up to date, and there's loads on them for the Museum of Somerset, the Somerset Rural Life Museum, Somerset Brick and Tile Museum, Somerset Archives. They're all got their individual website pages, and that's where the latest information will be. And there's all sorts of stuff on there. But as to opening, we haven't got a specific date yet that I can tell you, but all I can tell you is that we will be opening broadly in line with the government guidance for museums. So, you know, during the last gap between the lockdowns, we were able to open. We were able to open, and we had schools in, we had audiences. Schools was great. We had young kids in during that gap. We had to have lots of PPE and loads of safety around the rooms and the learning and the objects, but we managed to do it, which is fantastic. And the way we worked before, which probably will happen when we reopen soon, is the fact that it won't be just an opening where everyone can just arrive. We will probably be doing timed tickets again, where you can either book online to visit our sites, or you can turn up and there will be tickets available. And all that means, really, there aren't a limited number. It just means that when people arrive or book, they can start their journey around museums a little bit ahead of the next lot. So we've got gaps. And we're encouraging people when we reopen to follow a sort of a route around our museum. So we keep that social distance between people. But we've done that last year. We're well used to that, and it worked really, really well. And it was a great opportunity, actually, for people to just come along and enjoy their heritage, get out. And we know that when we reopen in line with the government guidelines, that there's going to be so many people that have had such little, interests to do in the last year, that we're going to have loads of people coming to our museum sites and archives, and enjoying getting out there again and just doing the things that they like the most. So we're really looking forward to welcoming people. But keep an eye on our Facebook pages and our website for the opening date, but it's not going to be far off.
Yeah, lovely. And yeah, you're absolutely right, of course. And people have got used to that social distancing, haven't they now? So they would expect it and want it, I'm sure, for most people to be able to know that they can see all this wonderful stuff safely and spend the time without.
Exactly, and that's what we want people to feel comfortable about. That's the main thing. And also, we want our staff to feel comfortable about working with the public, because it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Our staff need to feel comfortable and they need to feel safe. And we've done a lot. We've done an awful lot to make our sites, our services, very safe for both parties, the public and the staff. So it's all going to be really good when we reopen. So, I mean, one of the things I was going to talk about today, because there's so much in the trust, is the Museum of Somerset, which is primarily what I'm going to chat about this morning. The Museum of Somerset is in Taunton. Those of you that know it will know that it is Taunton Castle. The castle slap bang in the middle of Taunton. If you get off the bus at the old bus station, you actually don't get off anymore at the old bus station in Taunton, because that's not where they drop off. But if you get off at the bus station, walk towards Castle Bow, we're on the left, next to Castle Green. And we're lucky to have our modern Museum of Somerset based within the old Taunton Castle, and it's a real castle. A lot of people don't realise. I've got some pictures here. I tend to hold these up in a very modern, technical way. There's Taunton Castle. There it is. There's a view as you walk from Castle Green. A fantastic castle that grew up. The history of the castle itself is very interesting. There were fortifications at Taunton right from the Saxon time. So you're going back thousands of years to an actual original fortification. The modern sort of castle, I say modern-ish, medieval-looking castle there, grew up from the sort of 12th century, when the successive bishops of Winchester developed the site. There was an original Norman keep, and then they built different bits on, and it grew up, and the turrets appeared, the Great Hall appeared, the moat appeared over hundreds of years. I've got a nice little picture actually here, and a lot of people may not know that Taunton Castle, here we go, here it is. This bit here is the castle that you know now, where you go under the portcullis across the courtyard, but the castle was much bigger. There was an outer ward, and there was a moat that ran right around past the old library, those of you that know it, all the way around, and you had an east gate and a west gate. So it was in its time a very big castle. Obviously shrunk now with development and towns and everything else, all the changes over the years. But it's a lovely museum. You can still see the old castle. We can still tell you about the history of the castle itself. But the museum also tells primarily the whole history of Somerset. So it's one of those really nice county museums that tells a little bit about everything. So you come into the museum and you start off with the really early stuff. So you're looking at the beginning, you know, really the beginning of planet Earth, and when Somerset was really, really young. So you're looking at the formation of the minerals and the rocks and how coal was formed, you know, how coal was formed that we then mined in the Brendan Hills and this sort of thing. And then we go through life, you know, fossils starting, creatures beginning to populate the earth. And we've got amazing early fossils. We go on up through the fossil period, through the Jurassic and you know, the period where people know about the big dinosaurs, the T-Rexes and this sort of thing. We didn't have many of those, but I'll tell you a little bit about that later on when we look at one of our objects. And then we go through history. We've got all the different developments of human beings coming along to the county, how they change the landscape. And then all the way through, right up through Bronze Age, Iron Age, Romans, medieval time. And then we get into, you know, really quite modern stuff, really, relatively speaking. There's a lot of Victorian items. There's stuff about explorers, the great explorers that went out there. John Hanning Speke discovered the source of the Nile, and lots of his bits and pieces in the museum. And then we come forward even closer to our modern time, where we've got a military museum, which is very popular. And that tells the story of the Somerset light infantry, which are now known as the Rifles. And that's their entire history, right up to modern day items from the Rifles. It's a regiment that's still going, Somerset Rifles, and we've got quite modern day items, and we keep updating that museum. So it's a living museum which changes with the times. And there's so much to do at the Museum Somerset, because we've got stuff for families, we've got stuff for all ages, abilities, and there's stuff to see, touch, experience. It's a great museum, and it's a great introduction to an amazing county. I mean, you'd be surprised about how many incredibly interesting things there are just around your doorstep.
We just had a comment from one of my colleagues who said about going on a school trip to the museum with their daughter's school, and how fantastic that was. Yeah, thank you, Anna. It is, yeah, it's a real jewel that we have in the Central Taunton. So, you know, so easy accessible, as you say, as well, isn't it?
It is. It's very accessible.
Really nice cafe. Just have a really nice cafe as well.
Yeah,
not that I'm upset.
We've got a great cafe there, and you're absolutely right. A lot of people know us from our kids that have gone to the museum, our learning session, and we have hundreds of children visiting, learning about the county through our schools program, and that happens in Glastonbury as well as other places, and it's a great way of youngsters learning about the changes in their county. You know, you've got the curriculum you've got to learn about, you know, certain things, Neolithic people and this sort of thing, so they can come to Somerset and they can learn their curriculum about real things. They can handle real Neolithic objects and hand axes and everything else. It's a great way of engaging with history. It really, really is. And it's our history. It's, you know, everyone out there listening to this, it's your history. It's Somerset. It belongs to you, and you should share and really appreciate what a fantastic county you've got. So,
I'm sure it's going to be lovely. You get the school trips booked in again, I'm sure.
Yeah,
you know,
we've got bookings in already, which we're hoping to honour. So, very popular still. Teachers are really keen to get out there and bring the kids along, and we can do that in a safe way. We did last year, actually, anyway. So it's a really nice opportunity to get the youngsters back in. So I've got, as a little bit of a taster to some of the collections that we have within Somerset, and the Museum of Somerset in Taunton, I thought I'd just do a little bit sort of a bite-sized history with some real museum objects that I've got at home now. I brought home. They're from our reserve collections. I can't get into the museum, but they're from our other collections. And I've just grabbed a few bits right across the eons of history to show you some examples of things that you may be able to see at the Museum of Somerset. So shall I go with our first one? How about this? Right, okay. So the first real museum object, here we go. Now I'm going to hold it up now, and I'll describe to you what the item is. It's quite hard. It's got lovely sort of growth rings on it almost. It almost looks a little bit like a tree. There's sort of porous, fibrous bits on the side of it. It's round. It's quite heavy. Look, I can completely solid, and sort of brown and weirdly shaped, I suppose. So, Carolyn, you got any guesses? Any ideas what that might be? It looks a bit like something we might. It looks like a fossil. It is a fossil. Well, you're absolutely.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But
absolutely right.
It looks as though it would be wood, but of course that would have rotted away long ago. So, yeah. It's a skeleton or something.
It is. You're absolutely right. It is. It's a part of the vertebrae or a backbone. Yep, and the backbone of. Now, I was going to tell you this is the backbone of something called a plesiosaur, but I've actually discovered that I think it's more like an ichthyosaur. So this is a part of an animal and a backbone. I can tell you that this item is 150 million years old. So it's 150 million years old. And that is a really long time, actually. Just to give you an idea, it's sometimes hard to understand how long ago millions of years are. But I worked out for a session I did the other day that if you counted seconds, and each second represented 1 year, if you counted 1 million, it would take you 12.5 days. If you didn't stop, you didn't eat, you just went 1, 2, 3. Each of those years, even for 1 million, would take you 12.5 days. So 150 million years old. And it's the backbone, part of the backbone of a creature called an ichthyosaur. Some of you may know about Mary Anning and the fossils she found down in Dorset. She sells seashells on the seashore, old Mary Anning. And this is the creature. Here we go. Let's get it in picture. There we go. Top left there. An ichthyosaur, a swimming reptile. 150 million years ago, these were the sorts of creatures that populated Somerset. I mentioned earlier we didn't have many of the T-Rexes and stuff, mainly because during the Jurassic period, a lot of the county was underwater. So we had these sea dinosaurs, or sea dragons as they were called during the Victorian times. Swimming reptiles that have actually evolved, some of them on the land, and then gone back, evolved back into the water and survived and flourished during the Jurassic period. There's an ichthyosaur at the top there. I'll show you a bit closer. Looks a bit like a dolphin, but these are very different to dolphins. They're reptiles, absolute reptiles. And they would have lived in the seas. They gave birth, ichthyosaurs actually, with live young, which is quite interesting. If you think of reptiles, they tend to have eggs like snakes, turtles, this sort of things. But ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young. And we find these amazing fossils of these creatures actually still appearing around in Somerset. They appear on the beaches, on the Jurassic coast, Dorset, and then up on the north coast. And we've got some great collections in the Museum of Somerset, particularly this thing at the bottom here, a plesiosaur, a slightly different creature to the ichthyosaurs. Plesiosaurs got pretty big. Sometimes they could be as big as a double-decker bus, plesiosaurs. And we've got an amazing complete fossil in the Museum of Somerset of a plesiosaur, one of these creatures. which is right in the centre of our Great Hall in the Museum of Somerset in Taunton. You can see the whole creature, the whole skeleton, as it was found not that many years ago, actually. I think it was about 15 years ago the plesiosaur was found. This is a small one. We've got a juvenile, but they were almost the kings of the sea back then. They were hunters, you know, they were feeding off things like those ammonites and belemnites you find, and living, you know, 150 million years ago. So we've got an amazing fossil history of these great creatures that lived a long time ago, right here in Somerset. So that was our first.
We just got a comment from Chrissy, who's doing our lovely admin thing, saying, I wish John had been my history teacher.
Oh,
I
fantastic.
agree.
I still come to our museum and we'll. It's never too late to learn. Never too late to learn. How about
also just asking about the Heritage Centre and the museum. Is there any differential as such?
Yeah, the Somerset Heritage Centre, which is out in Norton Fitzwarren, is where the Somerset Archives are. So that's where you go and find out information about your family history, house history, the documents. Also at the Somerset Heritage Centre are, you know, our stores and offices and everything else. So that's the centre of the South West Heritage Trust. The Museum of Somerset has the objects, the museum, the collections that are on show to the public, the same as the Rural Life Museum and the Brick and Tile Museum. So yeah, in Taunton, the archives, and Devon Heritage Centre, the archives for Devon as well. So yeah.
So you wouldn't, it's not like you wouldn't visit the Heritage Centre as a member of the public. You would visit.
Yes, oh yes, you could. Yes, if you wanted to do research, it's best to phone up to say what you're interested in. But to do research and visit us is free. If you come along to us, all you need to do is give a ring, say what you're interested in, like, you know, maybe finding out more about Bishop's Lydiard, or you know, your family's called Baker and it's lived in Somerset for 2,000 years and you'd like to know a bit more about it. Give us a ring and you can come and do your own research for free. There is a paid research service for those that can't visit us, but yeah, no, it's free to the people to visit. Yeah. How about our second object? Shall we move on to another thing? Look, to give you a bit of an idea of some of the collections that we have in Somerset. Right. So I've got here some items. They're in a little case, and I'll take one of them out. Let's take this one out. Here we go. So it's tiny. It's hard finding the camera. There we are. It's a piece of flint. Okay, so you can actually, it's lovely. Look, you can see the light coming through it. Flint's lovely, isn't it? You can see the different facets on the different side of it there. It is a piece of natural flint, but it has been shaped. It's been altered by one of us, by a human being at some point in history. And I can tell you that that little bit of flint and the shapes, the facets that have been cut off it was made by somebody during the Neolithic times here in Somerset. So you're looking at about 6,000 years ago, somebody shaped that item for, and this is probably something like a scraper or a cutter, because it's got a really sharp, and even now, 6,000 years later, that's sharp, that edge. That was made by human beings to do some cutting, shaping, stripping, and it was the Neolithic period. So if I give you an idea what the Neolithic period was, you're looking at the period when we started to settle. We started not to keep wandering around hunting things. We decided to stay in the same place. We decided to start domesticating some animals for the first time, start growing crops. Yeah. So these people were the beginnings of our towns, cities, villages, where people stay and work and farm. Before that, you're going back to the people that moved around, hunted, lived in perhaps caves, the traditional caveman, yeah, going back to more 1,000 years old. So 6,000 years ago is really important time for the planet, because human beings really started to develop with animals, farming, all sorts of things. And they use these tools. They used this tool 6,000 years ago to help them do that.
Isn't it incredible that they not only were able to sharpen it to the extent that they did then, but it's still sharp 6,000 years later?
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. And it's quite interesting. You were saying, Carolyn, about wood, weren't you? Wood not surviving. And that's absolutely right. You tend to find in the ground things that have survived are things that are hard, impervious to rotting. So, you know, stone, metal, things like that. Although on the Somerset levels, because it's completely packed with peat, they're peat moors, wood has survived, because we do find really ancient wood on the Somerset levels because it can't rot in the peat, which is why we've got fantastic Iron Age stuff. But that's another story. That's another story. So yeah, so these people, Neolithic people, 6,000 years ago. Also, it's worth remembering, I think it's about 9, I could be wrong, but I think it's about 9,000 years ago, Britain became an island. Now, it really wasn't that long ago that we left the continent. We were joined to the continent by a leg of land, and that's how people came across from the continent. Human beings moved across into the country, but that land area was lost, and we finally became the country of, you know, Great Britain. So yeah, 6,000 years old. Look at that, fantastic. Right, how about another one? Let's go on through. We're moving up, we're going up through time. So we've gone from millions of years ago, 6,000 years old, and we're going to get to, what have we got here? This is relatively modern, this one, modern recently. Now, let's get it in picture. This is a weird shaped thing. It's a section of something. This would have been a long rail going this way, and we've just cut a slice. A slice has been cut out of it. So it would have originally been a long metal. It's very hard metal. It's man-made, obviously. I'll give you a clue. It's only about 100 years old, this one. But it is, in fact, part of an original tram rail from Taunton, when Taunton had its own trams over 100 years ago. This is one of the few remaining sections of Taunton trams. Now, you probably wouldn't believe that we had trams in Taunton. You see them all over the world, still in places like San Francisco, and even up north we've got some trams still going. But this is an original piece of trams. Sorry, Karen.
When did trams stop operating in Taunton, John?
Well, they started in, and I've got a lovely picture here. They started in about 1901 with the Taunton Electric Traction Company, and trams came to Taunton. In fact, Taunton had the smallest urban tramway in Great Britain, and it literally ran from the top of sort of Station Road down through the centre of town and ended up in Eastreach. It was one of the smallest tram companies. And 1901, when it opened, here we go. I think this is outside the County Hotel. There's one of the first trams, all decked up when it opened on its very first opening day in Taunton. It was a huge sensation. Apparently, in the first week, 2,000 people visited the trams or travelled on the trams through Taunton. And I think there were 2 cars running through the town, and you know, in the first week, 4,000 people odd had to go on Taunton trams. Got another one here.
Wow, that's brilliant footage, isn't it? Brilliant.
Look at that. There's another one. A Taunton tram. People travelling on the tram. People apparently just stood outside their houses in the middle of town watching the trams. It was such a exciting thing to do. But it was only possible because we had electric. The Taunton Electric Company had the generators in the town to allow the electric trams. Now, it wasn't terribly successful, sadly. Here's the last one I've got, and this is the depot. This is down in Eastreach, the tram depot. Actually, it's quite interesting because at the bottom of Eastreach now, we've still got the bus depot, haven't we, down in the same sort of place. There's the depot down in Eastreach. And in 1921, there was a bit of a dispute with the electric company who provided the electricity for the tram company and the tram company, and the power was turned off for the very last time. So we really only had trams in Taunton for about 20 years. But an amazing...
It makes you wonder, John, doesn't it, whether they will ever be reintroduced, you know, with the new, obviously, you know, the green policies and, you know, the electric cars that are going to be needed, and
of course,
and obviously trying to keep, makes you wonder if there'll ever be a return, at least in the town centre, doesn't it?
It does, and it's the whole question, isn't it, of public transport. You know, back then there was lots of public transport. You try and get a bus out into the villages these days, difficult, isn't it? So we had it. We've sort of gone back in time, haven't we? We've gone back to the things that we, you know, did years ago. There's less public transport. Yeah. We think we're improving, maybe. So we've gone forward in time a bit. I've got our next item. Now this is very Taunton based, this one. Now, this really is a bit of a mystery item, this one. It is a piece of metal, aluminium, I think, quite light, but it is really mangled, totally, utterly mangled. And if you look, there's some writing on little plates in it that any of you keen people out there will think, well, hang on, that's not English, it's German writing. So why would we have a piece of mangled metal with German writing on? I'll give you a clue. This is from a plane wreckage during the Second World War that landed in Somerset. This actual piece was from Puriton. This was from a plane crash, a German bomber that was brought down by our Spitfires in Puriton. It actually smashed into a garden on the side of a house in Puriton. And this is one of the remaining bits of that German bomber that was probably heading off to Bristol, I would think, or heading back from Bristol to do the bombings, because we didn't have much in this area, a bit in Bridgewater, a bit in Taunton. But this is the original wreckage. Now, interestingly, I was trying to find out what these different things, these labels on this piece of wreckage were, to try and identify it on the plane. And I did a bit of Googling, and amazingly, where's it gone? Here we go. This is the plane it was from, a Heinkel fuse box. It's part of a fuse box from a Heinkel. And on the internet, I found a picture of a Heinkel inside from a museum, and that little red bit there, there's our fuse box. That is a real fuse box from a real Heinkel. And that's my cat.
Incredible.
So, yeah, I'm just going to let my cat in a moment. The joys of living at home. 2 seconds.
You feel free. Feel free.
Isn't it great living at home?
Yeah.
So, yeah, a piece of wreckage from a Heinkel bomber shot down in Puriton. But I have come across a really nice story, a very Taunton-centred story about a plane that was shot down in Taunton itself. And it's from this is a little piece. I'm going to read this. It's not very long. A little piece from the People's War site about some memories of a chap called Reginald Selway. Some of you may know Reginald Selway, but he contributed to the People's War site. And this is his little story about a plane that was shot down right near Hestercombe House. I think it was on the drive of Hestercombe House. This bomber came down. And he says his memory is, on the night of the 27th or 28th of March, 1944, a German bomber was shot down and crashed near Hestercombe House, Taunton. We both cycled to the spot and were in hope of adding to our collection, because these were like schoolboys and they used to collect bits of shrapnel, all sorts of things back then. You wanted to get all the different bits and pieces that maybe fell out the sky. He said, but the site was so well guarded with armed soldiers, we couldn't get close. However, in a field nearby, we did find many unexploded incendiary bombs, which had fallen from the doomed aircraft. So Gerald and I helped ourselves to a bomb each and took them home, where we put them in our garden Anderson shelter. And some of you remember Anderson shelters, how they worked. Later that night, there was a knock at the door, and on the doorstep was a burly police sergeant who said that it had been reported that 2 lads had been seen carrying incendiary bombs. Now, of course, I denied all knowledge of this, and when I was sure that he were gone, the policeman had gone, I contacted my friend, went round, who was as scared as I was following the police questioning. Now, we recovered the bombs from the airway shelters and cycled to Taunton. On reaching the bridge over the River Tone, we threw both bombs into the river, where no doubt they still remain in the mud today. So ended a very stupid escapade, but even in wartime, boys will be boys. So there you go. Thank you, Reginald Selway, of his memories. So somewhere in the River Tone are 2 unexploded German bombs.
Oh, what a piece of history, literally. They've not been recovered.
I doubt it. I would think they're still there. And, you know, there's a lot of people do this magnet fishing these days, aren't there? So you never know what you're going to find in a river. All sorts of things. But Taunton actually itself wasn't bombed. I think it was bombed once. But we tended to get away with it. So, yeah. A piece of history fallen from the sky.
Yeah, and to get that background to it is...
It's lovely, isn't it? And lots of people have their memories still of the war, and their parents, how their parents served in the forces, and it's great. And they've shared that with us, and we've got all those memories in our oral archives, in our recordings, in our documents, and in the collections that we have as well. So talking about recent history, I've got one last item, if I could share that. Well, this is lovely. It's not millions of years old. It's not hundreds of years old. It's a school satchel. Do you remember the old school satchels? The leather school satchels that we used to go to school with. This is one of the originals. You can buy these now. They're coming back in vogue, aren't they, this sort of leather thing? But what is great about this was it says inside, look, West Monkton School, 3W, Gareth, what's his name? Gareth Richards. And the date at the top here, 1975. So this was Gareth Richards' old school bag in 1975. West Monkton School. Going back in the late 70s, this is what he took to school. Well, I've got another look talking about schools in Somerset. We've got an old exercise book. Look at that writing. Now, this isn't 1975. It's going back a bit more. I think this is about, or the date on here says, October the 19th, 1898 on this one. 1898. And somebody's been doing a botany class. There's botany diagrams, and they've done some bits from a flower there. 1890. And on the other side, geography. Here we go. This fantastic writing. 1890, and of course back then, I mean, even some of us will remember, you didn't write with biros, you didn't write with fine line pens. All this is done with an ink pen and a nib, isn't it? An ink pen and a nib. And I've got here some of the old ink wells. Look, those ink wells where I must admit, I'm a child of the 60s, late 60s, and when I went to school, we had the wooden desks with the lift-up tops, and we had the holes that these ink wells would have gone in. We didn't use ink, but many of you might remember using these old ink wells, dipping your pens into the ink in one of these ink wells, having an ink monitor. Somebody went around, filled up the ink wells. Those were the days, and it's not that long ago, really, is it?
We had those desks. I remember those desks. Yeah.
Yeah, with the little brass things that you could slide across, didn't they?
Yeah.
And you'd lift the lid up, and it would have graffiti going back years and years and years.
Yeah.
And bits of chewing gum, probably.
Yeah.
Bits of chewing
gum. Yeah. But that's great to have those. Those.
Yeah. I mean, modern history and stuff we all remember is great. It's a really good way of us remembering our past. We do also do with the Heritage Trust. We do a lot of work with older learners. We do reminiscence work in care homes and hospitals and older groups of people, and that's fantastic as well, because we can help with long-term memory stimulation and those that have dementia. And that memory of the past, the early days that still remains, is a really good form of therapy, I suppose, of being able to communicate now, even though some people have lost some of their early memories, their later memories.
Yeah, that's great to hear, John. And also it's great for therapy, as you say, for the people that tell the stories. And it's also great to capture that information that would be lost otherwise with the different stories, wouldn't it?
It is, absolutely. We've got lots of information in our archives. And the other thing is, if anyone who does social media, and we all probably do now after COVID, will know that there's so many groups out there sharing old pictures of their town, sharing old pictures of their school. It's something that we feel comfortable with. The past, our past, makes us feel. It gives us a sense of place. It makes us feel like we fit in, and we're part of that as well as museums. Yeah.
We've had a question about how do we contact you about the reminiscence learning sessions, because I think that will be something that will be picked up by quite a lot of people who will watch this with a view to being able to get some some people involved in that they work with.
Yeah, well, as I said, the Southwest Heritage Trust website is your first port of call, and in there is a learning section, and there's a whole page all about our reminiscence services, and you can click on that and you can find out how we can get reminiscence to you. We've produced over the COVID period a free downloadable, it's not downloadable, it's a YouTube reminiscence session about the Second World War, actually. So you can go on and you can click on that, and you can, at home with your relative, with your partner, you can do a reminiscence session about Somerset during the Second World War. Now it's there, it's live. But we also have sessions that we can come out and deliver to you. Obviously, with COVID, it's going to be a little longer, probably, before we can do that. But, time flies, and later in the year, maybe, we can come out to you, and all those details are on the website, and we can do live reminiscence sessions with real museum objects like I've just shown you, to groups. Sorry, Karen.
No, I was just about what I was going to ask you about. When you say to you, you mean in a group setting that could be arranged?
Of course, we do active living groups, over 50 groups, care homes, all sorts of organisations, and we can bring a lovely session to you. I do sessions, or have done in the past. We regularly do sessions from up to 40, 50 people occasionally, but we're often doing groups, lunch groups, this sort of thing, right around Somerset. And it's a great way of getting real objects out there. People talking. More about memories. Yeah.
There's not a cost involved to the.
There is a cost involved with us coming out to you, but it's a minimal cost, and those prices are on the website.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, fantastic. That's great to have that. Ability to be able to reach out like that to the groups in the community.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of other things. If you look on the Heritage website, there's other talks that you can take part in. Now we've got lots of talks online you can do as well. So look at the website. There's loads of talks you can actually take part in online until we start going again. On the website, there's lots of films. We've got a new online section where there's lots of films about heritage, about history. There's blogs, there's photos, there's all our art collections. There's lots of stuff for families as well. Activities you can do at home, activities you can do out and about now the weather's a bit better. So it really is packed full of a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's great. So I've got finally, so we've sort of gone through millions of years there. We've gone from 150 million years to about 1975 in the space of half an hour. But there's loads more at the Museum of Somerset that you can come and see. But I thought maybe we could sort of end with some real mystery items that I can try and quiz you on, Caroline. How about that? Are you ready for this?
Good luck with that.
As ready as ever,
Go on,
says
then.
Caroline. Okay, all right. We'll do
Exactly.
3 Okay. Right. So our first one. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a zoom around it. It's made of wood. Got some patterns on it. What does it sort of look like, the shape, do you think?
Can you take it back a little bit, John? Can you just take it back from the camera a little bit?
What about the shape?
Well, it looks. It's. I'm going with my excuse that I can't see it very clearly because it's very small. So I'll go with that. But it looks. It almost looks like a model shape. I don't think that's right. It almost looks like a shape of a model. But is it the shape of some kind of handle?
Well, you're sort of close. Yeah, not bad. It's actually, the shape of it is like a winged beetle. So it's a winged beetle shape. There we go. And it's made of wood, and it's got marks on. So I'll give you a clue. When I was
thinking of a model, I was thinking of an aeroplane. So the wing bit.
You know what? Yeah, it does look like a flying. Yeah, it's a flying beetle rather than an aeroplane, and it is actually from an Egyptian tomb. So this is an Egyptian tomb item, wooden scarab beetle. This one, I'm trying to look at the age. What's the age of this one? 945 BC. So 3,000 odd years old, an Egyptian tomb item. And we've actually got quite a lot of Egyptian bits in our collections. And this is a lot of it. It survived all that time. And we have that item in our collection, an Egyptian tomb item. So we've got weird stuff from all over the place, not necessarily just Somerset. We've also got a lot of collections from the collectors who lived in Somerset. So the people the adventurers, and I suppose you'd call them, who went out there and discovered things and brought things back, we've got their collections, those people who lived in Somerset as well. That's the first one. Plane, I like your idea, little modern plane. Very good. Yeah. What else have we got here? Okay. Can you see that one?
That's a rocket.
That's a rocket. Yeah. Yeah, it does look like you're absolutely right. It does look like a rocket. But let me give you a clue. Look, you would put your hand in it. Like that at the bottom.
It's not. Is it like poking a fire with?
No. It's got a hole. It's hollow completely. There's a hole at this end and there's a hole at that end. Metal. And look, if you would have been used like this, you'd have put your finger over that hole. You'd have dipped it down and lifted it up. You're very close. I'll tell you what it is. It is actually, it's a device for lifting out and testing cider, Somerset cider. You dip this into a cider barrel, put your finger on the top, lift it out, empty it into a jug like that, and then test the cider to see what it's like. So it's a traditional.
I can't believe I did that, because I do like cider. Obviously.
Oh yeah, well, 100 years ago, this is what would have been used in the cider industry, and we all like cider here in Somerset, don't we? Of course we do.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. A cider siphoner. Oh, I've got one more to go. Right. Now, a tiny decorated little shoe, yeah. But absolutely, look at my hand. Look, it's only that big. It's got a wooden base. Give you a clue, it's not from this country.
It's Oriental.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It is, in fact, this is 100 years old, this one, and it's a Chinese lady's shoe. And these were the shoes, there's the size of my hand. Where's it gone? These were the shoes that ladies fashioned over 100 years ago in China. There was a fashion to bind feet. Ladies from a very early age would have their feet bound so they were just stunted in growth, and it's literally only about 5 inches across there. And they would wear these tiny, tiny little shoes as adults because their feet were bound at an early age. Completely different culture and a nice little item, mystery item to have for whatever reason that's ended up in Somerset in our collections. But something else that is out there to see. So there we go. Well done. Good guesses. Good guesses. Yeah.
That was so really, really interesting and such good fun as well. And yeah, my guesses were rubbish, but that was really
very good. You were well on track.
It was very, very interesting and great fun. Christy's just asked if you have time, whether you could briefly just outline the heritage trail, John. Whether you were able to give any information about that, just briefly.
The heritage trail.
Yeah. Is that something that you kind of?
I think that's probably the trail that runs around Taunton. That was installed a few years ago. It's not something that we installed. I think it's the old Taunton Dean, Somerset and West Somerset now, whatever it's called. It's a Taunton Dean trail, that one. I don't know much about that particular trail. It's not something that we as a trust did ourselves. But having said that, if you keep an eye on the Facebook page of the Museum of Somerset, hopefully later in the year, we'll be able to do lots of town walks again. We were offering town trails and walks, guided walks around, really popular. So keep an eye on that. I can't promise when, but yeah, that things will exist.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Chrissy. That's really good to know that they're going to be introduced again, so that will be a really lovely way to see and hear and learn as well, won't it?
At Taunton,
this has just been quite fantastic, John. Honestly, it's been lovely, and we've learned so much, and it's given us real inspiration to just get, as soon as we can get out there and get back to these places. And as you say, in the meantime, look online, and that's great to know about the way that you can get out to the groups as well.
Yeah. And
so
honestly,
thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, and everything is on the website. And please do come and see us when we reopen.
We certainly will. Yeah, we certainly will. Thank you very much once again, John. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.